Hello, everyone. Welcome to Court of the Rings on twitch.tv/LotroStream. Thank you so much for being here today. We have got a special guest with us today, and I'm very happy to welcome our executive producer, Severlin, to the show. How you doing, Sev? Let me
Doing great.
make sure. Yep, now they can hear you. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you? It's snowing here.
I know it actually just started snowing about 20 minutes ago here. It's starting to come down. I think we're actually going to get a few inches at least on the ground.
Oh, I'm up to what, 5 inches now?
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just mostly been melting because it gets warm again here. So,
yeah. You're
yeah.
south of me, so
Yeah.
if you haven't seen accumulation, then you're lucky.
It's tropical here. Anyway, very much appreciate you joining us here today. So, for those who weren't watching the website or whatever yesterday, we did publish our 2023 roadmap. It's a letter to the players by Orion. Did so a lot of the writing for it, but it's really a look at the whole game for most of the year of 2023. Both an overview and we get into some details. So I'm going to drop into Twitch chat here, and you can just find it for anyone watching this afterwards on Lotra.com. It'll be easily available. But we're going to start by just going through a look at Lotra's 2023 here with Severlin, and then do some Q&A really for the rest of the show. So if you got some questions, feel free to drop them in Twitch chat. I'm sure we'll get to them kind of as we're going along. But we have a lot to talk about, and I'm sure a lot that you'd like to ask us about as well. So let's get right to it. So one of the things that we were able to do this time, which is really nice, is actually put up a roadmap. So let me get that roadmap up here on stream. Give me a second. Sure, now I can't find you. There we are. So you can see we've got really coming up very soon here a new instance cluster in update 35. It's called Return to Karn Doom, and it's going to have 2 3-player instances, a 6-player instance, and a raid. Yep, we got a raid coming here in the very near future. And what can you tell us at this point about it, Severlin, in terms of our update 35 release plans?
I mean, I think that the letter says it all. The update 35 is pretty well spelled out. We have endgame instances for the players that want to play their mains. There's new exciting loot in there. We've been doing some class updates for it. So there's a lot coming up as a follow-up to Before the Shadow, which was more aimed at lower level players. So I think that will be really cool. And then coming up later in the year, I think that there was some people that were asking about landscape. So we have a big landscape update coming up before the expansion at the end of the year, like we do every year. And we'll have a whole bunch of other cool stuff. I'm really excited overall for the year about the crafting update. I think it'll be really cool to kind of split off the various types of crafting and let the players choose to mix and match what they want. You could just be a gatherer. You could have a gatherer alt and just have crafting on someone. So once we split them up, I think it'll open up possibilities for the players. So I'm kind of excited about that. And obviously I'm excited about the news for the expansion at the end of the year.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit, because that seems to be the big headline that I'm seeing kind of outside of the live stream here. Real quick on that crafting update, we did mention that we're going to be doing, it'll be on the Bullroar preview server as well, but we've got a developer diary of sorts that we're going to be releasing. Not next week. We've got some other things for next week, but in the near future, that'll start talking about the details of what we're going to be doing with this updated crafting system. Before we get too far along, I would mention also update 35 is going to expand the delving system into the library and school at Tam Merdane. It's also going to include some tweaks to the rewards structure of the delving system. Now that it's been out for a little while and people have had the chance to run it, we've had the chance to see it for a while in a kind of a live environment, as it were. We're just going to make a few tweaks to the way things are distributed and make it more appealing. So Also smooth some of the difficulty transitions so you don't hit a spike wall like I do. So I'm fine until I'm fine until I'm suddenly very not. That's been my experience with delving so far. So yeah. We are also mentioning here in update 35, we are going to be getting the captain and warden getting their first updates. That was what I was referencing just a bit ago. We have got a developer diary for each of those that'll be getting published on Lotra.com here in the near future. We were busy this past 24 hours getting this letter and everything out. So I think early next week we'll be seeing at least the first, if not both, of those class-related diaries. And that'll give you, I think, a pretty good sense of what we intend to do with class work throughout 2023, because you will see that on the roadmap, and that's really what's being referenced. Is we're taking a look at a whole bunch of classes this year, and but we're starting here with the captain and the warden, and you'll be getting a whole bunch of information about that next week. One of the big bits in the 2023 roadmap here is that we are revisiting power, how it is used, how it is recovered, and it's important as a main statistic. So what can you tell us about that, Sev, in terms of what are our goals here? What are we doing with power?
Oh, you're diving right into it, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
So one of my concerns with any kind of power update is we don't want to just add something that makes the game less fun to play. In other words, we don't want anybody to feel as though they're just sitting there waiting for their power bar to come back. So one of the important things is the power is not something that you're likely to encounter on the landscape as you're banging through things. You should be able to get power between groups of mobs just fine, unless you're like dragging a whole bunch together. But every class should have a way of recovering power that will allow them to continue participating. So it's not like I do stuff, I wait for power, I do stuff. It's I do stuff, and then my power is low, so I use other things that restore the power. So I'll be still healing and I'll still be doing damage. I'm just not using my big heals and my big damage abilities until that power comes back, until I have a chance to gear up. And as I gear up, I use the little ones less and the big ones more. And it'll give another way for the players to sort of balance their stats. But if you feel as though you're waiting, then something is we've done something. So everyone should have the ability to build their power as they go along.
Let me mention that I'm reading a lot of excellent questions in Twitch chat, and we will be getting to those here in just a little bit. We're just kind of going through some of the bits on the letter here right now, and then we've got a nice set of questions here to answer. I don't know that, I think we'll see more from the system side about power revamp, right? I have to admit, in my own experience of playing the Lord of the Rings online, I generally don't have to. Power is not really a concern. My power meter really almost never runs out, and I can't recall the last time it's run out. So does that mean it's going to run out here?
If you're pushing the envelope of what you're doing, like in higher end raids or difficult instances, I mean, I could see it coming into play maybe in high level delvings or on the landscape. If you're like pulling a lot, you're chain pulling stuff, you may run into it. But for the most people who are requesting won't hit it. Yeah. However, you're going to have to make harder decisions in raids and dungeons when you're healing. You can't just hit your big heal on cooldown until you really gear up and sort of dedicate, and then you'll be able to dedicate stuff into power in order to overcome those challenges and that thing, or put your stats in throughput. So there's a lot of balancing that you will be able to do as a player for power. That's our goal. Is do you want your big power heals to hit bigger and you have to do them less? Or do you want to be able to hit them more often with power and you can do them more?
So there's an upside. It's not just downside. Yeah.
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 So they're looking at that, and if there's going to be issues, they will rebalance so it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't want a situation where you ignore it. I mean, it could be an important stat and a fun stat to work on, and I don't even think people value getting power on power regen on any of their loot right now. So.
Quickly related to the question from High King of Noldor, that seems an appropriate one now. Will the delvings apply only to the school and library or some other instances as well? With Update 35, that is what is being targeted, right? So all the delvings that already exist will be there, and then we're expanding it into these instances. And we do have plans to do further expansion in future updates. But for Update 35, yeah, it's the school and the library that are getting the delving up.
Yeah, we'd like to move them into other things, but it takes time and resources to move them. So we do a little bit at a time, so the players can. Yes, that
I think that does mean that, right? Because yeah, if it's the sizing of the instance isn't going to change with it turning into a delving, right? So. Quick note as we kind of just keep going through the calendar here. Ill Omens has some new rewards this year. That's coming out, real close here. There's a lot of discussion already about some of the monster play events that Orion has mentioned in the forum thread. I guess I will maybe leave those comments to stand in terms of what's being done on the monster play side, but we're bringing back the idea of events, and you can read a little bit more about that on the LoTro forums. We got the 5th season of the LI reward track, and the spring festivals getting reward updates at the very least as well. What do you want to say about the 16th anniversary here?
Sweet 16 is coming up. Hopefully we'll do some cool stuff on there. Do you mind if we're running? Do you mind if I hit up some of these questions?
Yeah, totally. That sounds fine. If that makes sense, let's start looking at some of these questions. Then people can read what's on the chat.
Only apply to school and library, or some other instances as well. For 35, school and library.
Yep.
That means 3-man delvings. Yes. Is delvings in school library only max level? Yes, they're only max level unless you are on an alternate server, in which case they will apply to the max level of that server if an instance is available. We want personal watercraft. We've actually been looking into what it would take to add boats and bopping around on water. So we're with you on that. Let's see. Any plans for a legendary server work? We definitely want to fix landscape difficulty, although it wouldn't apply to delvings because it's landscape difficulty. So.
I mean, we'll have some news, typically our legendary worlds, when they hit the end, when they meet current content, we go through a process of wrapping up that legendary world, and Shadowfax is set to roughly hit that this year. So we'll have to talk a little bit later on this year about what we're going to do about Shadowfax. But Shadowfax is going to be, getting up to current here sometime this spring, as I understand it.
Yeah,
so.
We'll need to move to a new legendary server at that point. So people coming in can experience the low end game with a whole bunch of people. We don't have anything to announce on there, but I would expect that a new legendary server will be coming at some point. That's certainly a reasonable expectation. It's kind of funny. The artists are looking to find ways of getting more decorations into the hands of players in the form of, big groups of things for your houses. So that is something that they have been talking about.
Let me maybe start at the top here. I know Dagger Thief had asked the questions. Are we going to see 64-bit servers this year?
The 64-bit servers, we have 64-bit clients. The 64-bit servers, some of the technology we use in our servers is very old, as you would expect for a 16-year-old game. And some of the libraries needed to be updated to 64-bit. And when we did that, they didn't quite play nice with our 64-bit servers or through a lot of that. So I would expect 64-bit servers to come out today, which should help both the instance servers and the master servers. That is our current plan. I know it's slow going, but we have limited resources, and we want to make sure that we also are dedicating engineers to new features to excite you as well. Will that help lag? There was a lot of talk about lag. So one of the issues that we run across is what type of lag. So we have 3 lags, right? One is the server is lagging, and your client can keep up, but the server slows down because of something. One is there's some kind of networking lag, and you'll see a lot of people on our European servers will see that as as the back and forth slows down for a variety of reasons. And the third is something is causing your client to lag. And you can usually tell by watching your frame rate whether that is it's a client lag problem. So if your frame rate is 60 or 120 if you have a really good computer and you're seeing lag, it's probably either server or related to the network. So sometimes it's hard because when people talk about lag, there's so much that can affect performance. We're not exactly sure where or what that happens. So when you're more specific, that's great. So what have we done? For phase 2 for lag, what we've concentrated on is the Quest system. The Quest system, unfortunately, was never designed for 16 years of content, and it's huge. The player's Quest thing is huge, and it adds a lot of performance, a necessity for performance as the player logs in, as the player moves from server to server. And every time you do something that requires a Quest to be updated, some of it is pretty, some of the code is pretty good, but some of the code goes through all of the quests in the game to try to update. So we've been fixing that, and we have seen a drastic reduction in hitches. Like we can see the charts. Have we solved lag? Absolutely not. But phase 2 is about these hitches that are dealt with for the questing system. For example, if anybody in your server hit a point of interest and they were an older character with a lot of quests, that would cause lag because it would go through every quest in the game. The other issue with lag right now, and that we're working on a fix, is the game used to go through every quest in the game when you logged in and update all of them every time you logged in. And that caused a lot of lag. And what we did is we changed it so that it only does that if the whole quest infrastructure changes. But the problem with that is that every time there's an update and you actually update, that code runs as everyone logs in for the first time. And so just when you want to play the game the most, because we put out some sweet new stuff, the game is laggiest. And then as everybody logs in, it gets less and less laggy. That is not ideal. We hate that because when people come in for an update, that's when it seems the worst. And we have a fix to that so that that won't happen. It will be much more efficient as people log in and update their quest. So all of this quest lag is the things that we're working on for phase 2. We're almost through that. Now, we haven't put in the quest changes yet. We have put in the changes for the point of interest. We haven't put in the changes for the login lag after an update. And so you'll see we've seen some good promising results as we've gone through and tested it. And that will help. So there's definitely a thing that a Wednesday happens, there is a update, and all of a sudden the game seems laggy again for 2 days, and then it goes. We're aware of this, and we're fixing that. So those are the things that we're working on for phase 2. Will that fix all lag? Absolutely not. We definitely can see other places that work, but these are the worst offenders, and we're working on that. Once phase 2 is done and the questing is a little more reasonable, the quest information in each player, then we can start working on a phase 3. And as always, we're working behind the scenes to look at lag from the server and database settings as well.
This question is from Schmooze. Do we plan to enable transfers from Treebeard to live?
Well, absolutely. Eventually when Treebeard gets to the end, yes.
Yep. We had talked about, I think that question is related to and asked about why they can't currently do a paid transfer, and we did do some investigation into that this week, and that may be something we can make an adjustment to in the future here. But there's a specific issue related to the landscape difficulty system. That is the reason why transfers are not, like today, possible from Treebeard to another live world. And so, but once it looks like most of the work that would need to be done in order to do something like a paid transfer from Treebeard, if we wanted to go that route, is largely done at this point. So we could do something in the future here, if if we want to. But otherwise, it would be generally along the legendary server.
Yeah, the interesting thing about character transfers is, so one of the things and one of the reasons the character transfers in both games were a little up in the air is we found out that when we went to Postgres a long time ago, which is a database program, sometimes, very rarely, when we make a call to it, it returns the information in a different order than we expect. But this happens infrequently and apparently randomly. I'm sure that there's some, technical detail about why occasionally it swaps. But it turns out it messes up character transfer, because if we're expecting information bit of 1 and it sends it to 2, then that's an issue. So we recently found that, and finally figured out why character transfers were a little iffy on both our games, and we are working on getting that into the game. The problem with that is that it just takes a long time to test. So you'll see that, and I think that once we fix that, the character transfer technology will be much more reliable, having fixed a lot of those issues that have been causing character transfers and all of the weird character transfer unavailability that you kind of see, that you're like, why are they turning off character transfers? I think that will all calm down, so that will be good.
Newsman asks a question that could be a very big topic, which is, what do we mean by the term new biomes in Q4? This is an expansion talk here.
Good question.
What do we mean by new biomes in terms of landscape?
Internally, we divide art into buckets, and one of the buckets is all of the plants and trees and rocks and what the sky looks like and the grasses. So when you go into a new area, what we use and show for, say, a swamp is much different than what we use in the mountains, in the dwarven areas, and different than what we show in Fangor. And when we go to a new area, redoing all of those is what gives the new area its feel. And so for this, we'll be working on new trees, new plants, new rocks and cliffs and such. We'll be doing things, because as we move south, you're going to go to coastal areas, and it's going to have a different feel as you get down along the southern coast. That's what we mean by biomes. You'll see new environmental art assets come into the game in order to help make these new areas both beautiful and diverse.
All right. What can we say about an avatar update?
So one of the things is the graphical update is going slow. I apologize for that. It turns out that with all of the things still going on with the pandemic, finding the right fit and the right scope for it is turning out to be time consuming. But the first of it will start creeping in. Hopefully, I'd like to see an anniversary update with some human avatar updates, hairs and heads, and a revisit of the human as we start moving through and updating looks. So I can't promise that the anniversary will have it, because it's a lot of work. But that would be my hope, if you're looking for kind of a time frame of when the avatar things will start coming into the game.
And what about general graphical updates, user interface, 4K, various things like that?
The thing if I could do two things and snap my fingers, one would be scaling UI so that the 4K monitor users can do it without having the UI really, really small. And the second is our map shouldn't take the whole screen all the time at any resolution. It should open up at a set pace, because when you open it up at these big screens, it just pixelizes. So those are the two things that we want to do with 4K. But when I say that we're looking for additional engineering and things to move in and start doing all of that stuff, that's the exact kind of thing that's maddeningly slow as you work through the contracting and scoping and try to find the right person that will do that. It's just going slower than, it's going about as slow as I expected, but slower than I had hoped, if that makes sense.
All right. I'm looking at questions.
I can read some. When can we find out about the PVMP events? That is more of an Orion question. I know that he is working on things. I wouldn't expect a giant revamp, but he's always doing some quality of life stuff for the PVMP. And that is, I noticed that some people like talk about things. Why isn't that on the roadmap? But the roadmap are like broad strokes of stuff that we're pretty sure that we can do. Not all details are on the roadmap. I would expect to see, like, certainly something like PVMP quality of life fixes would not be on that. But there's also some bigger things that we want to accomplish this year. But we don't put them on the roadmap because if something happens, there are things that we want to cut, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So not everything is on the roadmap that we're going to do in 2023.
Yeah, and as we get closer specifically to the work around the Etmors and such, that'll be getting its own discussion, probably by Orion, and probably for Bull Roar and beyond. So
Yeah, I think we have plans on doing some kind of new premium housing in the middle of the year someplace. I would. So that is one of those broad stroke things that if something happens or we need to pivot, that the premium housing would be something that would be on the table for us to move away from. But right now, it looks promising that you'll see that.
people want us to say a lot more about this new class that we're talking about, but I don't think we can we?
We could. I definitely could tease things about it, but I don't want to steal the thunder of the people that are working on it.
Yeah.
I would say that if you read the roadmap and its letter carefully, there are clues in there as to what the new class is.
There was an overwhelming consensus. We wanted to head south to less traveled shores, across the salty sea, beyond the Bay of Belfalis, and to the shore of the Corsair King's Umbar. And that is where we stopped. But we did say Umbar, so we're going to Umbar for the expansion. We could say that, right? So.
Is Orion the new producer?
Yeah.
don't stress him out. Like, as a senior systems dev, he already has too much to do. Yes, he did work on the roadmap and was kind enough to write up some of the stuff for us, but he could not absorb all of the producer duties as well. There's only so many hours in a day, and he's already plenty busy without having producer duties on top of that.
I'm seeing some specific questions about, well, what will it mean for people who have completed their 3 tiers of crafting? We'll get into that in, say, the developer diary and all that as we get a little bit closer to it. We'll make sure that all those points about it, because obviously existing crafting is of importance to a lot of people who have heavily invested into crafting, and so we're going to make sure we talk about all that sort of thing in the letter, but it's a little too granular to get into today.
Yeah, the current discussion, though, is, I believe, don't allow more than 3. I know that there was some discussion of whether we should do that or not. I don't think I think breaking it apart and letting you pick one, whatever you want, is in, but I don't know that we want to allow more than 3. So I can look into that. In case systems has a different view of it now than when I talked to him about it. The River Hobbit is one of those broad stroke things that we'd like to do sometime in the mid-year, and but it's also something that if we get into trouble, that could get cut, which is kind of why it's not in the letter. I hit the camera now; it's uncentered. I apologize. So I'd like to see that. In fact, I would like to see mid-year that the River Hobbit and the new housing are sort of have a synergy, but the reason that we didn't put it into the roadmap, and the reason that I don't want to talk about it too much is, as you've seen, I've been promising you a River Hobbit for a while, but it's one of those things that is, if we run into resource problems, the River Hobbit would get moved.
All right. So this seems like maybe a time to bring this up from the roadmap. As we move into the spring and summer months, our focus will shift to the growing threat posed by the enemies soon to be unleashed in our next major expansion. Period. Gondor, now experiencing relative peace, needs assistance in rebuilding and assessing strange goings-on. So we're introducing a new version of Gondor, no longer dawnless and harried by enemies, but of course there are still threats. And from a game system side, we'll be working on targeted class updates, crafting, monster play updates, and further adjustments to combat statistics as we move forward to the expansion, in addition to Midsummer and beyond. So we do have some plans really for the Gondor region here then for the summer.
Absolutely. But keep in mind that the Gondor updates are going to be moving the players towards new land. So you're going to have your cake and eat it too. You're going to see some Gondor updates post-war and then move south. Also, I think that it'll be interesting to see all of the problems that the end of a war can cause and the havoc it can cause on the common folk of Middle Earth, and the power vacuums and all of the things that can happen in, between that. And I'm pretty excited to see how the story plays out there. So that'll be interesting.
All right.
Can you go into more detail about the return to Karn Dune? I mean, we kind of went into detail earlier. So you'll see 6-man instance, 2 3-man instances, a raid. It'll be end game. As part of it, you'll see delvings brought to 2 3-man instances. I think they're 3-man. I apologize if I got that wrong. So there's a lot. There'll be a lot there to do.
Yep.
Let's see. There's people talking about housing still, so it's good to see people are excited about that. Can we get more details on what the landscape updates will include? So there'll be, if you like just questing on the landscape, there'll be the second update. There'll be one of the updates in the middle will have a lot of landscape questing, and then obviously the expansion at the end of the year will have tons of it. So you'll definitely see that coming up. And then the first update will be focused on instancing, and then there'll be another update that's focused on storytelling and systems, and all about we'll be adding new goodies to various festivals. So there's a lot coming.
Someone is asking about, with update 35, why not the Hunter? When's Hunter going to get some love, essentially? The answer to that is there is an intention to do at least some level of pass for all of the classes here in 2023. That's what Orion talks about in the roadmap there. So we're starting here with Warden and Captain, and, some may get bigger updates than others, but everyone's going to get, the goal is at least, everyone's going to get something here in 2023.
Yep.
Okay, so we did say that in Q4 we're going to be doing a level cap increase. Is there any work to change leveling questing to streamline it somewhat for new players, or do we like the current pace of it?
I mean, one of the things that so Lord of the Rings Online is kind of a different type of MMO where part of the fantasy is living in Middle Earth and moving there. And there's a lot of players that like that slow movement up. They don't need to get to the end. So I don't think that we want to go back and change the leveling experience in order to try to jam everyone at the end. I know that it's a very valid and rich strategy in order to get players to play together by saying, if you want a group, get to the end game, and then you can do grouping. And we do want to provide good end gaming content. But I don't think that we want to take newer players or players that are happy leveling in the middle and kind of change everything so they get jammed towards the end much quicker. It's not really what Lord of the Rings Online is about. It's one of the kind of interesting things, and the things I like about the game is that if you like taking your time and moving through the game and experiencing Middle Earth and all the questing, it's kind of a slow, a delightful process of exploration moving up. So I wouldn't expect that. Now, if you want to pound through the game and get to the end game, there are ways to do that. I know that players use skirmishes. Some players just stay on the epic story and go through it as quick as possible. But I'm not expecting us to go through. At some point, we'll probably need to deal with the increasing amount of numbers, but whether that's going to be a display, will display numbers as like 4K or 100K or an actual an actual squish, excuse me, of the math. Well, it remains to be seen. But I'm not expecting a level squish, for instance, if that's what people are asking.
Yeah, I think that was what was being kind of hinted at least in the question there. So.
I would expect that if you want that, and honestly, if Shadowfax was a great experiment, but it wasn't as popular as Treebeard. And Treebeard is an even slower server. So if we had had a flood of players and Shadowfax was hopping, I'd be more inclined to look at that. But since just the opposite happened, Shadowfax definitely had some players jump into it, and it was pretty vibrant, but it wasn't as big as Treebeard or some of our other legendary servers. So that's one of the things that we kind of look at when we're determining doing that.
Liren asks in chat, so just to be clear, once Shadowfax reaches the current level cap, does that mean it will close? That means that we will be sort of wrapping it up. It's not like day one shutdown, but after it reaches the main level of the rest of the game, that is the intention, is to, wind things down for Shadowfax.
As is the case with all legendary servers. All legendary servers eventually will catch up. Oh, I don't know if Treebeard ever will, but will eventually. And when it does, then we have the people move into the server that they wish, and then we move into a new legendary server. That's sort of like the experience that we're looking at. So yes, I would expect that as these servers get to their end game, that they'll close up and people will move to the main servers.
Do we have a rough ETA on update 35, Return to Karn Doom? I could say it's going to be relatively soon here. I mean, it is next, but we actually have it going to Bullroar here in the near future as well. And kind of while we're looking at questions, I'm going to actually look real quick. It might be real soon.
I would expect to see a lot of it on Bullroar in the February timeframe, and then it looking somewhere in March is probably what we're looking at.
And yes, that instance cluster is in update 35.
Yeah. I think a lot of people like to do the raids and the endgame instances for the story, so I think that you'll see normal groups will be fine. I think that some of the others, the more difficult groups, you'll want to form guilds. That's the best way and the best social means of doing that content is find a good guild and join it. Not only will you be supporting our guilds, which is super important, but I think that they can offer that, as you say, bringing people under the wing, offer suggestions and helping people out and finding people to play with.
Ceruleanity wants to know, will landscape difficulty eventually come to the regular servers? This would be the non-legendary live game worlds.
Yeah, hopefully sometime in the mid-year, that the landscape difficulty will open up on normal servers. I think they want to do a pass on it now that they have a lot of data for it. So, but I would expect that to come out. Certainly not for 35, but later in the year.
I think that, there's an outstanding question of how it would work, right? Because there is a certain mechanism in place that works on a legendary world that might not entirely work on a non-legendary one, which is that you really kind of need to lock in your difficulty by a certain relatively low level. And so you need to make sure you train the general users of the early part of your game, new players and that, to do that work. It was a little different on the legendary worlds because we could, we had new players on the legendary worlds, but it was also a lot of players who play on other worlds as well. So the knowledge was already there to sort of know how to pick it. So I know that there is some work that will need to be done before we could, say, bring the legendary difficulty to the live game world. So from
Yeah,
a technical standpoint there, we would maybe at least need to look at how we do that sort of gating and things like that.
yeah, that's the biggest holdup. That's a good point that I could have brought up, Quidovin, is that right now, in order to get the achievements for doing the landscape difficulty, you can't turn it off. If you turn it off, you interrupt that process, and it's not exactly clear to the players, that that's the case. And some players will get into the game and realize that too late that they need to turn it off, turn it on. We'd like to clean up the UI so it's more forgiving in that, so that the players can't destroy their ability to get progress on the achievements revolving around the landscape difficulty, because it's very easy to destroy all your progress right now. So we do want to fix that. What's up with the new launcher for the game? We're working on that. We are currently redoing the launcher. It's maddening that there are people that will use our launcher and then have to, after an update, work to figure out, redo the DirectX, or some bit had a problem, they have technical difficulties. So we definitely want a new launcher. We are currently working on that. We're deep in the bowels of development though, so I can't give you an ETA, but that is currently being worked on. I think that with all these class changes, will new mechanics and instances RAID be looked at? And then they basically clarify. One of the things that we do want to do is, I think we got a little far from the systems people helping the content people come up with the RAID mechanics and balancing that through systems. So the systems people would do their own things and the content people would do their own things. I think that one of the things that Orion was talking about, and the systems team is eager to do, and the content team is eager to do, is work more together as they're working on the RAID mechanics. So there's more synergy of the thoughts of the system team and what the RAID mechanics do. And that's one of our goals for this year, is to have that communication be much stronger. I think it was stronger when we were in the office, and I think that's one of the things we need to work on. It fell off a little bit when we moved to remote, and I think that we need to work on that. And that the team has said that they definitely want to do that. Any news on two-factor authentication? That is being worked on right now. The engineer who's working on it needs to have the technology on our authentication system to be updated, which is slated for the spring, before we put that in. So even though we've done a lot of work and we're getting towards the end, now there's a hold while other technologies catch up. Part of it is launcher. Like, we can't do new authentication because it needs to be put in the launcher, and we're certainly not going to put it in the current launcher if we're working on a new one. So the two authentication now is waiting on the launcher, which is waiting on the authentication server stuff. So that's the hold up there. It's just, it's a big system that touches a lot of things, and as we work on it. The Bjornings will be visited because they have their own resource. I'm sorry, my apologies. Bjorns don't require power. Do they just get a pass on the power update? I believe that the systems team intends to visit Bjornings and their resource management separately.
To a question about when we'll know more about the dating for update 35, that'll be available on Bullroar in February, and we'll have more information as we get a little closer to it. But it's next, and we're looking February-ish in terms of its preview and then subsequent release. I can talk a little bit about this one, and you can talk as well. Are we going to have any forum renovations? Switch to an official Discord to modernize communications a bit. There's two questions there. First being, yes, we are intending to get an update to the Lotro forums in 2023, and no exact date to say about that now, but the intention is to archive the existing forums and start fresh on a new platform. This will clean up really a decade plus of kind of technical issues behind the scenes and some of the functionality bugs that have been plaguing us for years and that sort of thing. And it's going to be a newer, better, faster, cleaner, easier to use experience, and that'll be happening in 2023 here. Adding an official Discord is something that has certainly been on my mind for quite a while now. There's a challenge when you make it official as opposed to it's a community run one. There are differences in expectations on the part of visitors and users of it. And it is, after all, a 24/7, 365 IRC, internet relay chat, essentially, right? Because it's a constant chat. Right? And so there are moderation and other things in terms of doing an official Lotro Discord that would need to get worked through before we were to open one up officially. But it's certainly been something that, as Discord has bloomed in popularity and people have certain expectations about its use, it's something that's been on our mind as well. So I don't know if you want to say anything about the forum work, but yeah.
I don't. I'm going to go through some more questions.
Yeah.
Do you like the current difficulty of delvings? It seems to me that high-end melee classes have some disdain for them and don't feel heard. I mean, we just basically smoothed out the difficulty, so yes. I think that we're going to be looking for feedback after that difficulty. I think that in every game, playing a melee has its own challenge because you're in the thick of things and you can't deliver damage from range, and you can't use distance to escape or to create instances for mitigation. So melee classes will always have that. And hopefully we'll be able to balance melee class survivability against that in order to make it worth it to play them and make it fun for them. Let's see. Is server performance a prior topic for the year? Absolutely. As I said earlier, we are finishing phase 2 of server performance, and we are beginning to work on phase 3 as we look into that. Making any chance to make old instances like Ost, Dungoth, or Buried Gulder have challenge modes at level 65. Revisiting that content is maddeningly expensive. One of the things that we try to do is like, what if we revisited old content and brought it up to modern standards? And it turns out that because the waves of content people had different methods for implementing, sometimes going into these old dungeons and touching them is more work than actually creating new content. So if something hasn't been touched, there may be a reason. It could be that it uses an old technique that we don't want to touch.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Liren says, is delving loot going to be changed to stop players receiving low-level crafting materials after doing high-tier delvings, for example? It makes the higher tiers unappealing.
I believe that they are even now revisiting the loot and rewards that delving is giving as part of U35. Whether that specifically affects the crafting material, I can't say. I would have to ask the systems team lest they...
I think the answer is yes. But so just to be clear, though, on the delvings, you're getting delving writs and other rewards as well. It's just true, though, having run a bunch of delvings myself, that the visibility of those crafting materials is there because you're opening up the crafting boxes and things like that from the rewards chest. But it's really a more minor part of the overall reward structure that you're currently experiencing in the delving system. So you're getting writs, you're getting the loot, you're getting the jackpots occasionally, and all the other bits. It's just that you're also getting this low-level home of constant crafting materials, and so the visibility of that part of the reward structure is fairly high, and I do think that is part of what's being looked at for update 35.
With the Atomor events, there is a wary feeling that too many players cause fights to turn into slideshows. Yes, that is the case. Do you think the current work you're doing will help change this? No. If you jam 150 players into an Atomor server, things are going to slow down, both for the server and if it's slideshowing, it's probably the fact that the client is having trouble keeping up with everything that's going on the screen. The people that do really, really crowded events like that, that is going to be that's one of the disadvantages of having, these huge Edmores things, is that you have to deal with the lag of it. There's not much way around that. The way the game is balanced for the maximum of 12 people, our PVMP can easily exceed that and cause that problem to happen. There's no amount of fine tuning or server work that we can do that's going to change the fundamental parts of the code that would make 150 person at a more epic battle have no lag. It just the technologies just won't be there. Can we make things better? Sure, we're constantly working on making things better, but the game was never designed to have that many people. The characters are too busy. They have too much data in them. The attacks have too much data going back and forth, and it would require the kind of redesign that I think would remove a lot from the game in order to do that. Now, could we make it better? Might there be something in the Edmore's monster play that makes them heavier? And maybe we can look at that, but I wouldn't expect these massive Edmore's battles to suddenly become more performant from our work. I know that's not what you want to hear. I'm just trying to be honest with you.
I don't know that we really want to get into detail on this upcoming raid yet. I think that's really more of a question for someone else, right?
I'm not going to go into the details of the raid. Like that's for you to figure out. Part of the fun of the raid is figuring it out. Will we see a 6+ boss raid again, or future raids? They'll probably stay at 1 to 3 bosses. The 6 boss raids it got a little sloggy, and for the massive amount of time it took to complete them on our side, we didn't see. I'd rather have the players be able to congregate to do smaller raids and then move to our instances, rather than spending like a long amount of time in the 6+ boss raids. What we found is the really long boss raids. I'd love to see more because I like raiding, but a lot of the players, it was just too much. It was hard to dip in and do it, and a lot of our players don't have massive amounts of playtime to do that. So I would rather have 2 raids at 1 to 3 bosses than 1 raid at 6, if that makes sense.
I've seen this question a couple of times today in chat. Do we have anything we could say about the transfer from previously closed legacy game worlds, like, say, Vanguard?
Oh my God. What a nightmare. So these things are all on old versions of the database, which makes moving them like just massively time consuming. And there's a lot of them. So I don't have any ETA on that. I'm sorry. There's a lot of that, and every time we've tried to do it, we've run into some serious bugs and instability. So I'm a little concerned about making any promises at that point for those. We'll see as we revisit it, but the fact that it's a completely different database now, and they were created under a different technology, makes the transfer of them difficult. I could add one mechanic to the game right now, Sev, what would you do? So one of the things I don't like about a lot of MMOs that use the tank, healer, DPS mechanic is that every single raid designer has to have a separate reason why the tanks have to swap or move, or why you just don't have one tank that tanks everything. I think I'd like to design a game with that has a built-in, the more you get healed, the harder it is to heal you until you have a time to rest, and then those drop off. Because if you did that, then you would have to transfer between tanks, and the healers would have a more interesting thing. Sorry to get into deep design, where the healing can't just spam heal on the tank, because they would be building up stacks of healing resistance, and then they'd have to slow down and let that drop off. And you could do some really interesting things with that. One is the tanks eventually would have to swap just because their healing resistance would rise so high until you couldn't really effectively heal them. But the other interesting thing about that would be the healers could really affect what kind of different heals that they do on the tank in order to prevent healing resistance. And the timing of that, I think, would provide an interesting mechanic for an MMO that would alleviate the need for having a separate tank swap mechanic every single boss, which is tend to do. So that'd be something that I would love to see. Would that work for Lotro in particular? Maybe, but obviously I'd love to see River Hobbits. I'd love to see, I mean, I really want to see the 4K updates. I think the most frustrating thing about the graphic thing taking so long is that big monitors, you know, you get a good monitor and it's hard to use Lotro, and that's tragic. So I'd like to do that. So those are the things that I would like to concentrate on adding to the game.
Someone is asking about, could we do a 24-person raid in the future again? You know, we talked a lot about game performance and things like that. Right?
I wouldn't want them to have to deal with the lag that a 24 raid would cause. I know you don't spam heals on tanks in other games, but that's usually for mana management rather than building up the resistance. If that makes sense. Like if you're spamming on the tank, then you're eating through mana. So
I've been seeing the chat from the PvMP players who were concerned about we've had some people suggesting that we remove heal target forwarding, and I do see your questions. That's really a question for the people doing work on PvMP rather than something we could really address today. But yeah, I do see your questions. I do see your comments in chat. Just want to acknowledge that.
I read that the healing target forwarding was a hot topic amongst the PvMP crowd. I actually read that on the forums as well. I can't answer that. That's more of a Orion question. I apologize. When I read that on the forum, I probably should have had a talk with the systems team about their feelings on it. But there's only so many hours in a day. I'll poke them about it for that. The other problem is, we wouldn't want to take that functionality away from it in PvP, and any changes to the targeting system are actually difficult because they're built into the C++ code and the client. And so we also don't want to spend a whole bunch of work removing heal target forwarding and then having someone do an add-on that adds it again. So I think that it's actually an engineering task and a tricky engineering task. And there's a lot of, and I don't know that I have the engineers to do something like that if it would be like a 5-week task or something to revisit the targeting system to do that. That was my other suspicion, is that when they looked at it, I'm pretty sure it would require some decent engineering. That's the challenge of working on 16-year-old code. Sometimes the engineer goes in and says, oh, yeah, I could do this. This would be simple. Sometimes they go in and say, oh, my God, untangling this will take forever. And sometimes they say, oh, yeah, that would be simple. But when they actually try to do it, they're like, oh, my God, what can of worms have I opened up into? But, yeah, I'll have to talk to Orion about that.
I think we're pretty close to the end of the show here. Do we have any kind of last-minute questions you want to get in before we wrap things up here for today? I would mention we do have the Tolkien Professor coming up after this, Druid's Fire after that. You can find our full schedule over on twitch.tv/LotraStream. I'll be back next Friday with Court of the Rings, and we will have this available on both Facebook and on our YouTube channel as well. So if you do miss this live, you can always watch the video on demand on Twitch, but you can also get it on Facebook and YouTube, which is in some cases more convenient for folks. So I don't know if there's any kind of last questions you want to answer here before we wrap things up. Can you find one here?
Yeah, there's like 500.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I can't stay until forever. So there's tons of like the players were really good about putting some good questions on there that we didn't get to. So hopefully we'll have another Ask Me Anything relatively soon. Once people have seen stuff on Bull Roarer, like after that whole thing, then we can ask him. I would expect so. One last question. We'd be offering a VIP discount again for the next expansion. It is. I don't think that our expansion will be changing, so that I would expect yes.
Yeah. Saw a question about the music system. As far as I'm aware, I'm not aware of any updates to the music system currently on this roadmap. We just have too many other things we're working on. But I could be wrong there.
I can talk to Bill about new instruments, though.
Yeah.
The new instruments are actually, he loves doing them. But the question is, can we get the animation time for them? So, but yeah, we all like new instruments.
All right. Well, I'm going to wrap it up then. Thank you so much for joining me here today, Sev, and I'm sure we'll see you here in not too distant future.
Great. Thanks for having me. Thank you, everyone, for asking some awesome questions. And I will be talking to everyone soon.
Great. Sounds good. All right. Let me drop that then quick and just wrap up the show. So thanks, everyone, for watching Court of the Rings on twitch.tv/LotraStream. I did want to mention this came up in the forums this week, and that was a forum thread about Lotro Legos, Lord of the Rings Legos. And I happen to have this one that I think used to be Sapience's, because I found it in the old stream room back in the day, and I took it home with me when during COVID and all that sort of thing. So it's just sort of been sitting on my shelf after being a backdrop piece for a while. And I didn't really realize this, but I understand this is maybe less common than I expected it. I just sort of figured everyone could have gotten it. But my understanding is it's maybe a little harder to get these days. And so I thought I would follow up on the forum thread. I'm not actually quite sure what this is. What is some kind of thing? I'm not quite sure exactly what it's supposed to represent, but there we are. So, yeah, I mean, there is the ring there, so okay. I thought I would show that quick. I hope you had a great show. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you again, Sev, for joining me on the show. I will see you next Friday for more Court of the Rings. Bye-bye.